I was loosely involved. And then when I came to Alberta and started teaching for Athabasca, that was right about the time there were some big changes happening at the university, and there are some very big voices, because Athabasca was kind of built on the like radicals, when it comes to the folks who have been teaching there, and that you always have the folks who are a bit more outside the box and left leaning in that. And so I met some of the greats like Jessie Byle and and Natalie Sharp and Dougal MacDonald and all those folk, and they dragged me to a union meeting and said, come listen. And then Jessie nominated me at that meeting to be a recording secretary for the local. I think it was my first meeting. And nobody says no to Jessie Byle if you ever met her. So, and so that's how so then I got involved, and it was those people. It was the people involved with Athabasca that really, those folks that had been fighting for things for decades, like childcare, all these things, and really believed in it. And it was that community that really drew me in and saw this is, I think, kind of people on the ground kind of are the only way that things change, and so that so that won me over. I ended up getting involved with CUPE Alberta for a number of years, and through that took a contract at the Federation of Labour, and in the meantime I had I had become involved with Unifor through my role at the Federation of Labour, and then ALHI, the Faculty Association at the U of A, and CUPE, and got introduced to COCAL, and it just, and since then, it's just, that's felt like home. It's the place where, because I recognize that, that unions are, about the greater social good. And I think, now more than ever, we need somewhere that is kind of the voice of moral reason, I think. And I think we have the opportunity in unions, like right now when, in this province we're being told we can't talk about EDI. Well, unions can still talk about EDI. Right. We can still keep that conversation going. Mm-hmm. Right. So.
Yeah. So tell us about your work at the Alberta Fed.
Mm-hmm. I ended up there, again, it was a contract role to help out. It wasn't a role that existed previously, but I had been asked to help teach at the Winter Labour School, and I had, as we all have, and I've and absolutely loved it. And they were trying to find a way to just connect with more workers, more locals and so forth. And the elected officials, of course, were run off their feet. So they created this community liaison role as a temporary role to work on relationship building in the community, and have somebody out there that could be carrying some of that load. And that, so I ended up there for a few years until I got hired here at the University of Alberta. And it was, again, my dream job. It's about, talking to people, finding out what they need, finding out, what supports look like for them, and just getting to know the different cultures of all the different unions too is fascinating. Coming from being pretty immersed in CUPE at the time, just seeing how other unions do things differently, see things differently, and so forth was absolutely fascinating. So that was a really like a really beneficial project for me, and it really has. It reinforced what I was already jumping up and down about through, the idea that systems and structures, if they don't flex, if they don't, understand individual unique needs, they render themselves ineffective. And I say that about unions too. I think they, in the union movement, we need to be nimble. We need to constantly be looking at what is happening socially, economically, kind of, what work looks like for people, and we need to be able to pivot. We need to be able to pivot and do things differently as we need to support people in the current context that they're in. And I think we could do better as a union movement. I think we still tend to be really kind of rooted in these, kind of the familiar of supporting big locals with people in bricks and mortar workplaces who are fighting about their pensions and pay increases and that. And that's not the reality for so many people now. And I think, we have some real challenges right now if we want to continue to be relevant and to be effective. And, and talking to all of those folks through my time at the Fed, again, it really enforced that we need to be hearing people and understanding that, unions aren't a monolith.
Right. Well, unions were built around not just brick and mortar, but usually people who had continuing jobs full time.
Yes.
And that's increasingly not what the workforce is.
Yeah.
How well do you think unions are adjusting to that?
I think we could do better. I think, we need to pivot how we think. And I think, the focus for me, union roles are service roles. You're serving people, just like, if you're elected as an MLA or a city council or whatever. These are service roles. We're here to, to advocate and serve people. What do they need right now? I think that, again, as with everything, we get kind of caught in, as soon as you create a structure, you get trapped within that structure. And this is the way we do things, and this is the way it has to be done. And I think we're a bit trapped right now because folks don't know necessarily how to organize in this current world. Mm-hmm. And there's been such a historic devaluing of anyone who's not considered like a, large local or a large entity in that too. It's about, the wins we're getting those organizing those large groups of people, right? But we have people entering the work world who are, doing piecemeal work everywhere and multiple jobs. And, and how do we support, and these are the most precarious people. So how do we support them, right? The people starting a job with the city of Edmonton at 18 and being permanent and getting a pension, like, that's not the reality for so many people now. So I think we're still trying to shoehorn working people into the boxes that are familiar, rather than figuring out, what do we need to do to support people, and thinking about it as what do we need to do to support working people, not how are we going to collect union dues from these people, and not saying that individuals think that way, but the structures force us to think that way, right? And so I'd like to see us looking more to, to other countries where individuals have taken it upon themselves to build collectives and collectives of workers, and that how can we build, how can individuals and that certify or sign on, how can we do those kinds of things? And how do we support the people who have 3 jobs or, 4 jobs? How do we do that? And the hospitality workers and the undocumented workers and all those, those things. Like, we need to be figuring these things out. The folks working after retirement because they can't afford to retire yet, And so I think there needs to be a letting down of the clinging to the processes and the ways that we've done things more. I think we need some new voices, some, and again, the structure kind of is built that in such a way that the folks that tend to be the most union involved tend to be the people that have the most secure jobs and have been there longer and that sort of thing too. And I think we need to start listening to some different voices and that. So I really do worry that we're going to kind of render ourselves as a movement kind of less and less effective if we and that young people leaving school today won't see the relevance for them, won't see it, and that if we don't start listening to them and doing something and doing things the way that people entering the workforce today are telling us they need us to do it.